Hey everyone, I'm Adrian. I'm the founder of The Proof, and I'm here today with Steph.
Hey guys.
Steph's the founder over at Levitate Foundry, and we're incredibly hyped to be with our mutual friend Ben today, the CEO and founder over at Disco. So, just to kick things off, Ben, if you want to give us a rundown of your background and how you got Disco off the ground, we can start there and dive in.
Yeah, sure. So started two gyms when I was in college in North Carolina. That would have been back in 2014 when I was a junior in college. So spent the first part of my career, suffice to say, in health and wellness. Became more and more interested in the sort of like ancillary categories that are associated with wellness and well-being outside of just like working out and the physical element. So think like, biohacking, recovery, sleep, nutrition, fasting, skincare as well, obviously, amongst a few others. And, when it came time to sell those gyms towards the end of 2018, I was looking for my next opportunity, and skincare, frankly, just jumped out to me because, one, I'd taken it more and more seriously in recent years after starting the gyms, but, growing up, I had a very close family friend of my mother, who's a very prominent dermatologist, who taught me to take care of my skin at a very young age. And so, throughout my childhood and into early adulthood and the first part of my career, I'd always taken care of my skin too. And, frankly, when I sold the gyms, I quite frankly looked at, my bathroom counter one day and noticed that I had all these different skincare products, maybe like 5 or 6 of them from a handful of different brands. Some are from female brands, some are from unisex brands, and some are from the more like traditional, like legacy male brands. And none of them were really that interesting to me from a positioning, a brand, and a formulation standpoint. So, frankly, just in response to that, started Disco, because I was personally frustrated with the options out there. So that was sort of the catalyst, my personal frustration for starting the brand. We started working on it at the end of 2018 and actually brought in that family friend I mentioned a moment ago as our, chief science officer. Her name's Dr. Eva Simmons O'Brien, Ivy League educated dermatologist who teaches at Johns Hopkins and has her own private practice. So yeah, you could say she knows a thing or two about skin and was super helpful in our formulation process. So yeah, that's a little bit about how we got started.
I love it. Specifically, I mean, bringing up the team member, and we were jamming about this, about potentially expanding the team from its specifically team and workflow perspective. Compare where you are now to when you first launched, like 2018, early 2019. Just walk me
Yeah.
through the differences there.
Yeah, so it's actually not too dissimilar from when we started, but that's obviously changing in the next like 45 days or so. We launched with just myself as the sole founder and a handful of agencies, Steph's included, Levitate Foundry. And, we launched the brand in October or November of 2019. And, frankly, until now, so we're in, what is it, March of 2021, it's still just been myself as the only, full-time employee. And I have, 3 or 4 outside partners that help, including staff. Been a lot, for the first couple months, we struggled a little bit to sort of get off the ground and scale. But once Steph and her team got involved at a more formal capacity, we started to see pretty tangible turnaround in terms of growth. So, now it's time for us to start thinking about like the next chapter of the business. The vision for this year is to continue scaling our D2C channel. We recently launched in Nordstrom nationwide plus online. We're launching on Amazon next week and have a few other exciting things in the works too. So, to service all of those, initiatives and projects, we're now hiring for a handful of roles too. So I think, while your question makes sense, I feel like most people would probably have said, we have 4 or 5, even up to 10 employees at this point. We've just stayed super lean until things started breaking. And now we're, aggressively hiring to, sort of fill those voids within the business.
So I want to jump in quickly. It's been incredible how you've grown this business, and I've seen it literally from day one. I'm honestly so impressed. How do you do it all? I mean, you're one man, all these agencies. Most people have someone on their team managing all the agencies, but you kind of do everything. What
Yeah.
drives you? How do you project manage? How do you time manage?
Yeah, so I actually have a pretty maniacal process for managing my time. So I use Superhuman for email, and that's super dialed in. I use VimCal for my calendar, which just hooks up with your with any Google-based calendars, and I block off basically 7 a.m. until 1 p.m. Monday through Friday, so no one can talk to me then. If I talk to you, it's probably because I'm reaching out either via email or otherwise. I don't do any phone calls before 1 p.m. And that basically allows me to tackle 3 to 5 tasks per day and have basically, hyper focused time blocked off, what we call like deep work, to where I can get all the things I need to get done within the various categories of the business. So supply chain, whether we're developing a new product, or sort of developing new landing pages for growth or doing some CRO work on the site. Doesn't really matter. I can sort of systematically hit those from say like 7:30 or 8 a.m. when I start working until about 1 p.m. when I break for lunch, and then I start my afternoon phone calls. So I use Notion as well to stay super organized, and I basically track my tasks in there. And then I have longer term projects as well. So I would say that like organizational design is probably the only thing that's allowed me to scale this business to the scale it's at now alone, like without being super dialed in from a calendar and scheduling and sort of time management standpoint. This would have been, untenable. So yeah, that's it. Really just comes down to organization, to make a long story short.
Well, props to you. I mean, it's honestly amazing. And glad to know. I know you've responded to me many times before 1 p.m. So
yes, you make it in the VIP group stuff. Yeah, just be. I will rescind that. I more make it so that I don't have any phone calls then, and then if I want to respond to someone via email, I can do that then. I also have like a blocked off period of time for that too. But yeah, you make the special list stuff, of course. You and Adrian both.
I appreciate it. No, that's ultra focus. I love. I might take these pointers from you and start doing that myself, actually.
I'll share my Notion template with both of you after this, which I think has really allowed me to sort of scale my time. And, frankly, I work a ton, but when I'm not working, I can sort of just enjoy myself and chill out, because I have like all of my thoughts are, categorized and organized in a way that like I don't forget things. And I have, very rigid reminders and everything set up. So yeah, I mean, for some people it's maybe a little bit intense, but once you get used to it, it just sort of is a fail safe for staying organized.
These are kind of similar questions, but in terms of the specific like qualitative criteria that you're looking for in both investors, contractors you work with, agencies you work with, people that you're hiring in-house now, if you had to run through kind of like top 3 criteria that you like in the people you work with, what would that be? Energy, integrity, communication. Kind of like, what is your skill? What is your set?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I'm actually going through. I just finished the Notion template just before this, actually, where we walk through our culture, the perks, salary, equity for each of the 5 rungs within our organization. And I was thinking a lot about the hiring process, because I actually just started hiring for 3 or 4 roles today. Actually, I had an interview just before this. So those are things I need to do some more reflection on. I guess if I had to give an answer gun to my head, I think people who are hard charging, that have like the indescribable sort of X factor of finding ways to get things done, even against all odds and timing. That's really important to me. It's just what I would call, like, for lack of a better word, grit. It's usually a quality that really good founders have. I think it's possible for good operators to have it too. Basically generalists that sort of are fairly formidable in their mindset, emotionally as well. So that's super important. Communication and transparency is really important. Even if people are making drastic mistakes or make a huge mistake, I'd rather just them own up to it sooner rather than later. I'm not someone who says like, hey, if you make a problem, also come to me with a solution. I think at this specific stage within our business, the way I want to sort of build the culture is that we should surface problems sooner rather than later, even if they're small, just because, we're so early stage that I think collaboration and problem solving is super important. And obviously as we grow, we can sort of create a culture that, also has a culture that basically, requires people to come with solutions as well with their problems. But at this early stage, I'm just looking for people to be really transparent is my point, my sort of second. Is folks who just aren't easily like rattled or offended, if you will. And I don't mean necessarily like people who aren't easily triggered by like the typical stuff that's going on in our world these days. I mean like people that are really committed to our mission to become the best skincare brand out there and are willing to make some sacrifices to ensure that happens. Now, I don't expect people to work 16 hours a day. the working hours for disco that we've set in our culture document is basically 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. But, on occasion at this early stage, once or twice a month, I'd say, we'll need people to sort of stay after and things like that. And I think people that don't get bothered by that, who aren't just like flying out the door right at 5 p.m. and shut everything off, those are the people that I'm looking for, because, we're compensating people slightly above market salary. We have great benefits, and, we're also giving a substantial amount of required time off. So I think, despite asking and demanding a lot of our team members, we make up for that in sort of culture, compensation, and then also required time off as well. So hopefully those three answers, albeit a little bit of a rant, are sort of sufficient for your question.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And then switching lenses, kind of the other side of that question, to angels, funds, whoever's investing that you want on the cap table, kind of similar question of what characteristics do you look for them? Is it tactical advice, hands-on business acumen, or is it networks, et cetera?
Yeah, so initially the angels that we welcomed into the business were mostly just very wealthy angels. A lot of them, just by happenstance, have pretty significant deal experience, not necessarily within CPG, but our big private equity individuals are public company C-level folks, and have seen and been a part of a lot of 9-figure and even 10-figure transactions on the sell or buy side. So I think that'll come in handy a little later down the road. Now that we're sort of entering the more mature phase of our sort of life cycle as a business, a CPG business in particular, we're looking for more strategic capital that can sort of plug in and help me with things like hiring and broadening my network for potential job candidates, thinking more intelligently about retail strategy and rollout, and experience there. And, I'm another sort of criteria I'm looking for this current round that we're about to close are other founders and high-level operators that can bring real strategic value to me. For lack of a better word, basically like mentors who have done what we're doing now, but are, 1, 2, 3, even 4 years ahead of us. So that hopefully that answers your question. For this current round, just to give you some more information to chew on, we're welcoming an Austin-based investor that specializes in performance marketing, and then also has a deep expertise in retail as well. And those two things are like pretty much the lifeblood of any CPG brand. So that's why we chose them as our lead. And then we're filling it out with a few of our other original angels that have last bit of the round is basically allocated for really strategic people, that bring a lot of value on like the retail or performance marketing or hiring side.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious, within that realm, this could be e-commerce or otherwise. When you were launching Disco and now that you've scaled it, are there any specific founders or executives, whether you know them directly or not, that you've kind of looked up to, whether it's mentor figures or otherwise, that you've always just kept in the back of your head?
Yeah, so I have a pretty solid group of e-com legends, basically, that I go to, you and Steph being a part of that brain trust as well. I'd say it was middle of COVID, so like sort of July 2020. I basically started aggressively networking. Yeah, I was already aggressively networking, but I started being very strategic around trying to meet all the best operators, marketers, and founders in the space. And that basically helped me transform our business, because I went to them in a pretty vulnerable state and was basically, said something along the lines of like, here's where we're at, here's where we need to be. I'm sort of hitting a roadblock here. What would you do? And, that vulnerability goes a long way in an industry that's, in my opinion, pretty riddled with like snake oil. Lots of people love to say they're doing X in revenue or have X number of subscribers, when in fact, like, they really don't. Of course, there are big hitters in the space that have built huge businesses, but there's a lot of like ego on Twitter and things like that. And it's really comical to me. So when you actually get in the circles where there's like actually badass, operators and marketers and founders scaling huge D2C businesses, you should listen. And that's really what I've done. I don't necessarily feel comfortable naming like some of my advisors publicly, but basically it's the typical like sort of famous marketers and operators within the space. And I'll be honest, like I'm shocked at how kind people, including both of you, have been, and how willing people are to offer their time in exchange for nothing, by the way, too. So, I would say for those that are sort of just starting out or sort of in the early stages of their brand and are sort of grappling with, something like how to acquire customers profitably or what channels they should be advertising on, etc. Just reach out to people. I think you'll be pretty surprised at how willing people are to help.
Do you think that is specifically unique to the e-commerce ecosystem because it's so small and everyone seems to know each other? Or do you think that extends to like finance, health and fitness, other sectors that you've been involved in?
I'd say without having worked in finance or real estate, but having grown up in that environment, there seems to be even more ego in like finance, for example, because everyone's competing and you're dealing with people that from day one, from the moment they were born, like they're sort of being crafted into that. Whereas D2C and e-com tend to attract more like creative and like Ivy League and top porting schools and things like that. So they're fundamentally different, obviously. But I think D2C, in my experience, or the consumer ecosystem, is fairly open-minded, usually full of like pretty interesting characters, some eccentricities, which is the case for every industry, but especially in consumer. And from what I've seen, as long as you're not a direct competitor with the person you're talking to, like people are pretty willing to share best practices and help, just because, frankly, the more successful that all e-commerce brands are, or e-commerce first brands are, I think that's sort of like one of those, the rising tide, raises all ships, or whatever the idiom is, right? So I guess my answer would be that, in my opinion, in my experience, I think the consumer ecosystem is more helpful than others. I just think it's also full of like diversity as well. Like it's pretty monolithic when you look at like real estate and banking. It's generally like white males, right? In consumer, I meet new people every day that are from wild backgrounds, wild social statuses, from very wealthy people all the way up to like, or all the way down to like, people that came from absolutely nothing. So, it's been a fun ride, sort of just like plugging myself into an ecosystem that I wasn't a part of before I launched Disco. Whereas most people sort of come from the ecosystem, whether it's like affiliate marketing or working within a brand and then end up launching their own. It was kind of interesting just to come in cold. I don't know if that makes sense.
But yeah, only have a couple minutes left. So whether it's this quarter or like late last year, if you want to walk us through like a couple of big wins that you're particularly proud of, whether it's Nordstrom or otherwise, and then any exciting expansion plans you have for the next few quarters.
Yeah. So, I think on the digital side, we've tripled our conversion rate in the last 2 months, or excuse me, in the last 4 months, which is like astronomical. Obviously, like it almost sounds unbelievable. I think that's less a testament to us being geniuses, more a testament to us having a pretty poor setup to begin with. So when you're working with something that's pretty garbage, like it's pretty easy to make improvements. So I'd say that's been a pretty monumental milestone that we're pretty proud of, that Steph and her team have had a lot to do with. Secondly, on the retail side, we just launched with Nordstrom in early January at their 50 biggest men's grooming stores plus online, and that's going exceptionally well. So we're very proud of that and excited for the future with them. We'll be expanding into a lot more doors with them this year. And then, I guess another sort of like distribution comment is Amazon as well. So we're launching on Amazon next week, and we view that as a very viable channel in the long term as well. And I guess the last things would be, there's a lot going on in like the last 2 or 3 months. The last thing would be, closing out our seed round, which we launched about 60 days ago, and then making a number of initial core team hires as well. So there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts. And the only way I can stay faithful to my time is through Notion and these hacks that I mentioned in the beginning of the call. So yeah, appreciate you giving me the airtime to sort of air some of our big wins recently.
Yeah, of course. And we'll definitely align this with some fun announcements on your end when it's going live. But until then, this has been perfect. Really appreciate the time, man. Always good to catch up.